And we'll go into more detail about what that really means. But in short, it means that you have a stake in the success of the corridor that we're going to talk about today. And we are going to help you understand why you were invited, what your role is, and a whole lot more about what this East-West Corridor high capacity transit planning effort is all about. So I'm Marie Keister, and I'm going to turn it to Zach, our project manager with COTA, Zach Sunderland, to say a few words of welcome.
Yes, thanks, Marie. Welcome, everybody, and good morning. My name is Zach Sunderland, Senior Service Planner at Central Ohio Transit Authority, COTA, and I am the project manager for the East-West Corridor project. As you can see on the participants page, we have a large, diverse group of stakeholders along the corridor study area. Community leaders, subject matter experts from nonprofits, businesses, municipalities, and various agencies along the corridor. If there's one positive thing about the pandemic is we can have you all here at once and go over this together, which would be a little bit more difficult in person. So that is one benefit of the pandemic. But yeah, thanks again for being here. We're happy to get started, and we have a lot to cover today. So I'll turn it back to Marie.
Great, thank you, Zach. And you are going to see some people behind the scenes and many presenters today. Our meeting today is really going to be a combination of presentation, then we're going to have polling, and then we're going to ask you at some points to unmute and I will facilitate our conversation. But if you would stay on mute for now, that'd be really helpful. If you're dialing in by phone, if you would hit *6, that's a way to mute yourself as well. The presentation, I did distribute this PDF in advance of this meeting, but it may also be posted online later. So the presenters you're going to hear from today, you've already heard from Zach Sunderland. You're also going to hear from Julia Suprak from AECOM. She is the project manager. And then Gavin Poindexter and Preeti Chaudhary are also from AECOM. And in just a minute, I'm going to introduce you to Gail Saunders and just some logistics. So first of all, we are recording today. And Mindy, you can go to the next slide. And we're using a chat box today. And so you are welcome to write your comments in the chat box as we go along. Please know that I'm going to be monitoring them, but they start to flow and it's easy to lose track, but I'm going to do my best. And I have people behind the scenes who are also going to help me keep track of your comments and your questions. So feel free to write in there and that'll be a great way to participate until you can unmute. Then also, you were specifically invited as a stakeholder group member. There are potentially a few people who are joining us that didn't receive that official invitation. We're delighted you're here, happy to have you listen in, but I want to make sure that our stakeholder group meetings have the first opportunity to ask questions when we unmute our button. So let's just focus on the stakeholder group meetings for that, but members, I should say, but by all means, feel free to use the chat and join in that way. All right, let's go to the next slide. And if you haven't done so already, I just want to remind you that if you right click on your name, you can make sure you spell out your whole name, and that's helpful for us to track who is here with us today. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to give you a Link Us overview. Maybe you've never even heard that term, so we'll get you up to speed on that. Then we're going to dig into what the East-West Corridor is all about. What does that include? What is the purpose and need for why we're here today? So we're going to get into that. We're going to cover initial screenings of the mode and the alignment. This AECOM technical team has been doing a lot of work to prepare for today, so they have some great information to share. We'll also share evaluation methodology. Don't worry, we're not going to turn you all into engineers, but we do want to make sure that you have a chance to understand what all goes into this decision making, because you are going to play a role in this. Then we're really excited that we have public meetings coming up and a lot of other ways to get involved. So we'll talk about that. And then before you go, we'll make sure you know what's next. So thank you, Mindy. Before we move on, we want to take just a moment to remember Danette Danny Palmore. Danny was a member of our team. Tragically, she passed away just a couple of weeks ago, and we are experiencing a great loss of that. And really, the whole community, if you've ever known Danny, you know what a legacy of joy for our city, the warmth for all of us, Columbus's people, and how many bridges she helped build behind the scenes to bring us together. And just briefly, I want to explain what you're looking at. You may be aware the Longstreet Cultural Wall crosses the bridge and it links the Discovery District with the King Lincoln District. You may not have realized, but Danny played a critically important role in working with the community and our arts representatives to get their input. And she is showing her joy with Kojo Kamau, one of the artists that day, as we finished the design for the wall. And then the pictures are showing people experiencing that Longstreet Cultural Wall. So what a wonderful legacy to Danny if you walk on that bridge today. All right, so I am going to turn this over next to Gail Saunders, and she's going to tell us about Link Us. And I just want you to know, Gail is on the front page of the paper today. So we have the rock star Gail Saunders to share what Link Us is all about.
Well, thank you so much, Marie. And you certainly didn't give me the headline that you were going to share that today, but I appreciate it. And I do want to just say thank you so much for honoring Danny. She certainly is a community treasure and she will be sorely missed. So thank you so much for recognizing and honoring her. So glad to be here with you today. I am excited about the work that we're doing in this space. So excited about the East-West Corridor and what's happening here. I want to talk to you about the overall Link Us initiative, of which the East-West Corridor is a part. So when you think about Central Ohio, we know that it is growing, and many of you know that we are expected to reach about 3 million people over the next 30 years. And so with that growth, that means significant changes in our community. It also gives us a choice to shape how we want our community to grow and how we want our community to be. So we believe that you have choices to make and we have choices to make in how we develop our community. So when we think about that, we have an opportunity unlike any that we've ever had before, and that's what Link Us is all about. We want our communities to make policies that regularly impact our lives. And we have an opportunity with this work to really look at those policies heavily and change the work that we're doing to make sure that what we do includes all people in all communities. And so in order for us to do that, it's going to require collaboration, which is why you're here today, and it's going to require commitment. And I want you to know that MORPC, CODA, Franklin County, and the City of Columbus are working hard to drive this initiative. And so what is Link Us? Let me give you a high-level overview of what we're all about. Link Us is Central Ohio's transformational and comprehensive prosperity and mobility initiative. So what we mean by that is we want to provide equitable mobility options for all of our residents and for those visitors who come to our great city. We want to ensure that as we're making these plans in our corridors, that we are really focused on how do we drive access to jobs and affordable housing. And then of course, economic growth, that drives the whole engine of Central Ohio. So we want to make sure that the work that we do in these corridors helps to promote that. And Link Us is about improving sustainability. And so how do we do that? We do that in a number of ways. The work that East-West is going to lay before you today, and some of that work includes high capacity and advanced rapid transit. We'll talk more about that today. But it's broader than transportation. It really does include how we move about in our city, bikeways, green space, roadways, pedestrian improvements, and that development that comes along when you build new corridors in our community. So smart development, deliberate development, and intentional development that supports all people. And so how we drive this work is through these 6 themes. And everything that you see in this work, it really is based upon how these 6 themes: equity, priority number 1. I'll just say that, priority number 1. Workforce advancement. How do we make sure that the work that we're doing gets people to better paying jobs, jobs that help them move and build and grow their family? That's important. Innovation. And so some of the things that you're going to see today, it really is going to show how we're going to be first in class in some of the innovative work that we're presenting. I mentioned before, economic development, that is critical, and we must be able to make sure that we're staying ahead of that, driving that, and keeping that top of mind. Affordability. When we talk about affordability, not only are we talking about how people move through the city, but it also incorporates affordable housing in that mix as well. And then, of course, I mentioned before, sustainability. So those are our driving principles that help us as we shape the plans in these corridor projects. And so, corridor projects, as you go to linkuscolumbus.com, you will see there are a number of corridor projects that are planned for the community. Right now, we have 2 that are online. So the next slide. And that is the one we're talking about today, the East-West Corridor Project. And another one is the Northwest Corridor Project, which focuses on that Olentangy, Bethel Road area. So those are the 2 corridor projects that are in play right now. And that is what Link Us is all about, linking the region to make sure that we're moving this region forward. And with that, Marie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
We're going to do some polling now. So this should be easy to use. So Nick is going to pull up a question and I'm going to read it to you. And you should have a button on your screen so that you can respond. So Nick Hoffman, if you'd pull up our survey number 1. While he's doing that, I just want to note the folks who are on this stakeholder group. First of all, it's just an extremely impressive group and we appreciate so much you're all here. And it ranges from transportation advocates to transportation experts, but also we have the area commissions represented, really from as far west as basically the casino to as far east as Jefferson Township. And we have affordable housing experts on this call. We have mobility experts. We just have community leaders. We have faith-based organizations. We have social service agencies represented. We have corporations and business groups. So this whole plethora is really going to help us have robust conversations. Of course, we're doing this virtually, so that makes it a little interesting. We'd love to see you face to face, but we'll get there eventually. So Nick, are we having technical difficulties on our survey, or can you pull that up? All right, so here, we're gonna go to planning.
We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so I'm gonna try to see if I can work through that.
Okay, well here, I'm gonna make this easy for you. We're gonna go old school. So the first question is, had you heard about Link Us before you received your invitation today? So here's your first chat box exercise. Were you aware of Link Us before today? So quick yes, yes, no, whatever.
Or we could use the raised hand feature as well. Oh, people are already doing it on the chat, so that works.
Yeah, they are jamming. Sweet. Okay, so let's go. I would say the majority are yeses, but we have some no's. So glad to bring you on board, and you're going to hear a lot more about Link Us regionally over the next year or 2 and longer. So we're glad to get you up to speed today. All right, let's go to the next slide. And that question is, are you excited to be a part of this? Are you excited to help shape and transform this corridor? So the answers there are yes, or let me think about it. That's okay. And if it's no, I'm thinking you wouldn't have accepted the invitation, but let us know and we may have more work to do. So again, the question is, are you excited to be involved? We're excited to have you here, as you can tell. Lots, oh, I love the exclamation points. We're seeing lots of yes, definitely yes. So we appreciate that. All right, survey question 3 is, all right, so you got to think about this. What is the primary mode of travel? And I'm going to read them off for you. For your customers or your constituents or your clients, whatever word works best for you, within the East-West corridor today. So we're talking Broad Street to the west, downtown, and then to the east, either Broad or Main Street. Are they using primarily bus, bike, carpool, driving, a scooter, Uber and Lyft, walking, or other? Okay, and I just want to say, I know we've got some bicycling advocates on here, so I know we've got some bikers here, bicyclists. I know we have people who use scooters. We understand it may not be the majority of their travel, so.
And Marie, I just want to point out someone responded Zoom, which I very much appreciate. That should be our new pandemic option.
Love it. All right, so the next survey question 4 is, what would attract you to ride transit more or more often? Okay, so you can type this more succinctly if you want. More frequent or reliable service, fewer stops, shorter travel times, that's number 2. Number 3, would it be more comfortable modern vehicles? Number 4, more comfortable amenity-rich stations? Or safer access to stations and bus stops and transit stops? Okay, so look, I'm seeing some polling. Actually, looks like we
I was trying to get to my last one. Apologize. It looks like I won't be able to.
I'll tell you what, let's not worry about the polling on this one, and maybe we can get it for the next round of polling, which is going to be in a few minutes. All right.
There we go. I've got it, Marie, if you can.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, so you're seeing on screen now, I think. What would attract you to ride transit more? And let me just close it out. I'm going to count 5 to 1 backwards to finish up your votes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to end polling. And all right, so more frequent, reliable service, that came in top. Fewer stops, shorter travel times. More comfortable modern vehicles came in at, more amenity-rich stations came in at number 3. Looks like we have a close tie. More comfortable modern vehicles and safer access to stations. So as you know, this is not a representative poll, but it gives us a good window into your thoughts. And I'm sure you wanted to put all of above, but we decided we had to force you to pick one. All right, let's go to the next slide and snap out of that survey screen. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Mindy, before we do that, I'd like you to stop sharing for just a minute, which may seem a little odd. And I'd like you to go back to double check some of your later slides and make sure, if you and Preeti could talk offline to make sure you're using the most current PowerPoint. So if we could do that for a minute.
Preeti, could you just share the link of the one you're working with just so I can make sure?
Preeti, yeah, why don't you share yours? And Mindy, can you take the polling off the screen, or maybe that's just on my screen? Yep, okay, just on my screen.
You want me to share my screen and take over?
Yeah, Preeti, I think that
that would work.
That'd be good. So you guys have been on a million Zoom meetings by now, so you know it's always fun working through the technology. All right, so while Preeti's pulling that up, I just want to read some of the chat box responses that Rachel, thank you. Buses have their own lanes. Bus Rapid Transit, thank you. Faster travel is one of the chat comments. Seeing if I can see more of them here. Shorter travel times, less time consuming. By the way, everything in this chat is going to be recorded in the meeting summary notes as well. All right, Preeti.
Yeah, sorry, just trying to find how to share my screen. Oh, here we go.
And while she does that, our very next step is to introduce Julia from AECOM, is our project manager, and she is going to give you the East-West Corridor overview.
Great, thank you, Marie. I just want to reiterate how excited we are to be here today, how thankful we are that you have chosen to participate and support this effort. We have really great momentum and collaboration from a lot of the different participating entities throughout the corridor. So your feedback and guidance is going to be critical to us as we go through this process. So while we're waiting here to get the PowerPoint pulled up, I'll just give you a quick overview. So Gail had showed us that map, the Lincus map, showing the West Corridor and the East Corridor through the downtown. So that is the corridor that we're going to be studying through this project. That is going to stretch about 20 miles. And you have two alignment options on the east side. So we can stay either on Broad Street or on Main Street. So that's one of the key decisions that we're going to be making through the course of this study, as well as what the mode is going to be. So at the end of this phase of the study, which is going to be in about August of this year, we will have a recommended project that we are going to advance to the federal government to request capital funding and to advance further along in the design process. So this is our starting point. Here's the corridor here. You see that there's a buffer area around the alignments. That'll be the study area when we're looking at benefits and impacts. And then as we look at the next slide, this outlines what our process is going to be. Basically started in October, again, going through about August of this year. So we have developed the purpose and need for the project. So we're going to talk through that with you today. So that identifies the goals and objectives, and very importantly, outlines the evaluation criteria that we're going to use, because we are employing a two-step alternative development and evaluation process. So we do an initial screening, which we're going to share the results of today with you, where we look at the modes and the alignments, and we see if there's any at a very high level that we know just aren't going to work. So this step is not about determining which alternatives are better than each other. It's really just throwing out the ones that we know aren't going to work for this corridor at this time. We also are working to identify the corridor segments that is going to support step 2 of that process, the detailed definition and evaluation of alternatives. So we're going to talk through, Preeti's going to talk through what those segments are, and then how we're going to move into that detailed evaluation. So that's when we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of project-specific capital costs and operating costs and ridership and traffic impacts. So that's coming. We haven't done that yet. What we're doing now is just narrowing the universe of alternatives to take into that more detailed level of design and evaluation. And then at the end of this, again, in the August timeframe, we'll have that what's called a locally preferred alternative. That's a Federal Transit Administration term. It basically just means the project that we've all decided is the best one to move forward for additional study. So when you hear us say locally preferred alternative or LPA, we just mean project. So let's move on to the next slide. So we want to talk about you and what you're doing here with us today and how you're going to help us moving forward. So we have 3 different teams and groups that are really guiding us through this process. We have the project management team, which we meet with on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. It's a very small group. It's really focused on those nitty-gritty weeds of helping us navigate the evaluation process. We also have a technical group that we're meeting with 5 times over the course of the project. This is staffed by different representatives from the cities, the townships, ODOT, and other partner organizations that are going to have a hand in implementation. They provide us a little bit more detailed guidance and feedback, and then you all, the stakeholder group. So we've talked through who's comprised, who comprises this group, and we really to provide us guidance on how we're aligning with the community vision and providing that bridge to your constituents, your stakeholders, your neighborhoods, whoever it is, because we want this to be a transparent process. We want it to be community driven, and to do that, we need to make sure that we're hearing from everyone who will be affected and benefit from this project. All right, moving on. So in terms of what the decision framework is, so each of these groups has a little bit of a different mandate. So the project management team, they really help us focus on that studying aspect. The technical group is going to be advising us based on their local technical experience. And then you all, the stakeholder group, have, I'm going to say, it's probably the most important role, is we need you to reach consensus on that recommended LPA by the end of this process. So that's what we're going to be looking to you all to support us on, because that recommendation is going to go for approval to the Lincus Executive Partners, the CODA Board, and the MORPC Transportation Policy Committee. And then from there, it's going to move on into more detailed evaluation and into the federal process. There's additional detail there on the bottom I'm not going to get into about sort of the steps that we go through in terms of decision making. So you can review that with your hard copy and let us know if you have any questions about that. So here's the schedule. Again, I mentioned we started in October. We're going through August. So we're at the January milestone right now. You'll see we had our second technical group meeting in January, our first stakeholder group meeting with you all. And you can see that we are just coming to the conclusion of that initial screening step, that's step 1, and setting ourselves up to start step 2. And then our next meeting with you is going to be in April. And that is when we're going to come back with all of this detailed data around the ridership, the costs, the benefits, the impacts, to help support that consensus building towards selection of an LPA. So we'll present all that information in April, and then June, come back and have that conversation about what the LPA will be. So I think that, we'll move on to purpose and need. So like I said, this is that first foundational step in terms of providing us with a framework within which we're going to develop and evaluate the alternatives. So the PMT and the technical group have already reviewed the 5 needs that we identified. So we want to share them with you and make sure that we're covering all of our bases and that we're not missing anything. So I'll run through those quickly here. So the first 2 you'll see on the screen here. The first one is really about that reliability, frequency of service, and fewer stops that result in shorter travel times. So really making the system as efficient as it can be for the riders. We also want to make sure that we are connecting and integrating both the existing underlying transit network and the planned high capacity transit corridors. So right now we're focusing on the east-west corridor, but this corridor, the northwest corridor, all of these have to function together within a high capacity network, and those high capacity networks have to function within the broader CODA system. So all these pieces have to come together. And then our third need is really acknowledging that there are many residents, people who live within Central Ohio who rely on CODA for their mobility needs. They do not have a car. So we want to make sure that we are making sure to support their mobility. And as we see a need for, increasing access to employment opportunities and core services. So really giving people a equitable way to expand that access to opportunity through improved mobility. And then the 5th need here has to do with development. So spurring focused and compact infill and redevelopment along the corridor. So working with communities to envision what that development could look like around station areas, making sure it's context sensitive, making sure it's reflective of community character and preferences, and then it doesn't displace current residents. That's a huge concern in terms of avoiding displacement and preserving affordability. So we have our eye on that as we start to go through this process as well. So I think now we're going to pause and do another set of polling questions.
So let's try this again. So we have a question. Mindy, if you can pull it up. All right. Mindy, can you go? That's not quite, there we go. Not this one, but oh, we already did this one. Okay. Mindy, pull that poll off, that survey question off, and I'm going to ask you all a question verbally instead. And Pretty, while I do that, I want you to stop sharing your screen for a minute. And let's go to the question. All right, in the chat box, answer this question. We just surveyed the purpose and need. What have we missed? All right, what other mobility challenges do you see for your various customers, clients, constituents, friends, or families? So what we're trying to get at is, what do you see the mobility needs being in this corridor? So I'm seeing them. Preeti, I want to say again, can you pull this down, the presentation for just a minute? Stop sharing, please. And I want you to double check some later slides for me. If you check your text, you'll know what I'm talking about. All right, so let's read what we hear in the chat boxes. So I happen to see first, danger of bikes riding along with cars, a desire for dedicated lanes for bikes, accommodating those who have disabilities, the first line, first mile, last mile connections. So if you made a comment about first mile, last mile questions, can you unmute yourself and share with me a little bit more about what you're thinking there?
Yes, this is Kathy Becker. What I was thinking was, if we have major, really advanced transportation along the east-west corridor, what about the people who live maybe a mile or two away from that, south or north of that? How do they get from where they live or work to the stops along the east-west corridor? Are there going to be other buses that maybe aren't so advanced, working these other routes?
Thank you so much. I think that's an excellent point. Oh, here's an interesting one. We should look into changes that allow better festival traffic and reroute as needed. Allow Broad to be available for all festivals. And I'm not sure what the NVMM acronym is. So can that person chime in and share with us a little bit more about your thoughts? And then we're going to move on ahead, and Preeti will start sharing her screen again.
Sure, Maria. I'm Lieutenant General Mike Ferreter, and NVMM is behind me. And
oh, that's Memorial. My apologies.
The fact that you don't know makes the point, and that is been open for 2.5 years, yet Broad Street's not available when festivals were going on, which means millions of people who come to that part of the town are kind of guided south to the two southern streets. And so I think it's time to welcome us. It's time to assist CODA as we come back to foot traffic, and as we build these beautiful facilities and mixed use facilities that will in fact link downtown to the Saddle Peninsula to Franklinton, make that easy. The point for this group is, as we did in San Antonio in a previous job, when you reroute traffic for cause A, you need to have the the Department of Transportation and federal help you create the new route. So whichever, I'm not from Columbus, Ohio. I'm an Army guy from Columbus, Georgia. So whichever Main Street or whichever is the alternative when those go on, so that's also an easy flow for traffic. All the while, if you look at where the commerce is, you'll see that the most likely connecting avenue is not being used when we have everybody walking, except for apparently St. Patrick's Day and some motorcycle day. So I think that's a really important big step for us, and really want everybody's support. And that brings us to Experience Columbus. That brings us to conventions. That brings us to goodness for this great city. Over.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we are about to move into a big section. Your feedback on the chat box has been fabulous and nice to actually hear some voices. So Preeti, we are now going to go to Gavin Poindexter, and we're going to talk about mode. So take it away, Gavin.
Thank you very much, Marie. So as part of our initial screening, we started off by looking at modes and alignments throughout the corridor as two separate elements of this phase. And when we get into the detailed evaluation, we'll pair those together and define and flesh out what those are and develop the evaluation specific for this corridor. If we go on to the next slide, please. So the modes that we were considering for this corridor were bus rapid transit, light rail, modern streetcar, and commuter rail. And then if we go on, we're get a little bit more detail about each one of those and how they're being defined here. So bus rapid transit is something that typically serves a corridor of anywhere from 5 to 25 miles, can travel 25 to 5 miles an hour, really is kind of guided by the speed limit for that corridor or that segment. Station spacing is typically half a mile to a mile, depending on density around that area and kind of what you're serving in different parts of that corridor. And it can operate in either dedicated lanes or mixed traffic, again, to be context sensitive and fitting into that environment. It has one of the things you'll see on each of these slides as we're going through, you'll see that there's a picture of the vehicle at a station and then a vehicle out not at a station as you're going through. So if you just can kind of picture that to help you out. One of the things I do want to point out is as we go into the next slide, is again, just how similar that station was for BRT can be for LRT. And the fact that we can kind of fit and blend those things together, really it depends on conscious efforts about how much we want to invest and what features we want to incorporate into the design of any of these modes. Light rail, again, is looking for kind of a 10 to 20 mile corridor is kind of its sweet spot. Is generally going to be in a dedicated lanes with overhead catenary, at least for portions of the alignment. And again, we're looking at about a mile apart. Maybe in downtown would be a little bit closer station spacing. That's just sort of how you typically are designing those. And again, these are all kind of national best practices for each of these modes that we're following. Again, same as BRT, there's traffic signal priority, real-time passenger information, and off-board fare payment. All of those things are kind of woven into the different modes and are really not mode specific, if you will. So you'll see some of those features can be carried on to different modes. If we go on to modern streetcar, here again, we've got, this is typically a shorter corridor, 2 to 5 miles is kind of its sweet spot. And station spacing is about a quarter to a third of the mile. So that is more frequent station spacing than we were seeing for either bus rapid transit or for light rail. That's kind of, it's more of a circulator function and to provide that little walking assist, if you will. Again, some of the technology and features can be applied to any of those modes. Yeah, if we're moving on to the next one, it would be commuter rail. And kind of, again, looking at the commuter rail, this is really for a longer corridor, kind of connecting not just inside of a city, but almost to this inner city, or at least city to suburbs and exurbs of a community is kind of its general function. So you're typically looking at 25 to 80 miles in length for your typical commuter rail line, and station spacing could be anywhere from 5 to 10 miles apart, because it is trying to bring people in for that longer distance trip, if that makes sense. and it is typically within a freight or at least a passenger or a former freight rail corridor is typically where you will find commuter rail. If we want to go into the next slide, there's also been some talk locally about some other modes that were not considered in this evaluation, primarily Hyperloop and monorail. And the reasons why those were excluded is they're really much more expensive, upwards of 500 million per mile is kind of their cost. And generally, you know, Hyperloop really is designed to serve that intercity trip primarily. And so that's it. That's not kind of the corridor fit and the need that was described by Julia when she was talking for the East-West corridor anyways. And that's kind of our focus is East-West corridor at this point in time as we're moving forward and talking about various modes. So as part of our modal evaluation, we focused on 5 criteria as we were going through it: corridor fit, ridership and market need, cost per mile, operating cost per hour, and that's the cost that's going to be a reoccurring annual cost that we're going to need to be setting aside. And then the availability of a right-of-way and how much space that mode takes up within the right-of-way. Now for each of these, we looked at 4 kind of evaluation: best, good, fair, and poor. Anything that kind of got that poor rating, we will be setting aside and not carrying forward to that detailed evaluation. As far as the good, fair, or best, those would kind of move forward and we'll reset the balance, if you will. So if you got a best here and a fair there, that's not carrying forward onto the next round, and we'll be developing that individual criteria for the detailed evaluation that is specific to the East-West corridor as we're moving forward. So if we want to kind of move on. So here, as we're going through the typical mode and distance, click. The streetcar, that's really a 2 to 5 mile is sort of its sweet spot, as we had talked about. And this East-West corridor, as most of you are aware, is about a 20-mile corridor. So then we've got light rail, and that hits it. That's a fairly good fit for that, as you can tell. And commuter rail is really looking at stuff beyond our corridor length. So it's not quite as good of a fit when it comes to that length. And again, bus rapid transit, similar to light rail, is in that sweet spot for this corridor. Click it one more time. Yeah, so those two, you know, got good, best, and again, those will kind of wash out as we move forward. Ridership capacity. This is kind of based on daily riders for these modes around the country. If we want to start to, so again, modern streetcar, that's up to about 6,000 riders. Light rail's 20 to 90,000 riders typically. And commuter rail is 3 to 20, where BRT is, you know, up to 4 to 15,000 riders, just for some comparison to some of the local routes here in Columbus. So the CMAX line, that's just over 4,000 riders per day in 2019. Route 10 is about 7,000. And Route 2, both, for those of you who know, Route 10 is, Route 10 is on Broad Street, and Route 2 is East Main up High Street up to Ohio State University, and that's about 8,000 riders. So for this corridor, currently it's about 7 to 8.5, 9,000 riders currently, as you do some permutations of what it would be in this corridor. So when you're looking at investing in high capacity transit, you can generally expect an increase in ridership with that investment, but that would typically range from about a 20 to 40% increase in ridership. So if you look at that, that puts us squarely in that range for both bus rapid transit and for commuter rail, whereas modern streetcar is going to struggle to meet that demand, and light rail, you're going to have some excess capacity provided. One of the things, kind of looking at that cost per mile, we've got bus rapid. This is for construction or that initial capital investment. So we've got that range of rider costs for bus rapid transit, commuter rail, modern streetcar, and light rail. As you can tell, these are proportionally weighted. Bus rapid transit is, and the inner circle is kind of the low range of that circle, and the outer circle would be the high end of that range on a per mile basis. So as you can tell, bus rapid transit is a little bit lower in cost. Commuter rail is not that much more, especially at the high end of each one. Modern car gets to be more expensive, and then light rail is more expensive on that capital upfront side. When we move on to the annual O&M costs, similar, they're proportionally scaled. This is for the annual cost per hour of service that's provided. And you will, again, see that inner circle is the low range of that, and the outer circle is the high end of that range. So again, bus rapid transit is a little bit cheaper to operate on an ongoing basis. Light rail and modern streetcar cost roughly the same. And then commuter rail has a much wider range, I would say. It can cost similar to light rail and modern streetcar on a per hourly basis, but there's also the outside chance that it would be much more expensive. And part of that comes into various agreements with freight railroads that you're partnering with as you're trying to develop that corridor and how that agreements work out. Another thing we wanted to talk about was the right of way. So how much space are we talking about taking up within the corridor? You know, if you think about it, these streets, these public access locations are a community good, and there are multiple needs and benefits for it. Earlier, we were seeing in the chat box, we want to prioritize bikes. We want to prioritize transit. We want to prioritize walking. Well, we need to prioritize, we have to get all that into the same space. So what is the best fit? BRT is a little bit narrower. It's up about 24 feet for the guideway. And then we've got stations that are roughly 10 feet, kind of on that minimum side. LRT and modern streetcar, you're closer to 32 feet with 12-foot stations. Now the difference there is LRT is generally in a dedicated guideway, while modern streetcar is generally in mixed traffic. And then commuter rail is a little wider, 36 feet for double track with stations. And it's also generally in a totally separate guideway, generally aligned with a freight railroad. So that really doesn't fit this corridor. If you look at what we have here in the east-west corridor, there's not there's a rail line that kind of goes off to the east, but it isn't really next to the community that we're trying to serve here. So kind of as we bring that up into a summary, you'll kind of see, you know, modern streetcar doesn't quite fit that corridor fit or ridership capacity. Commuter rail doesn't have that corridor fit. The cost per hour and right-of-way availability make it so it doesn't score quite as well. Light rail will likely be providing too much capacity, and its capital costs are a little bit too high. So that kind of, bus rapid transit is the one moving forward. So if we go on to the next slide. And so, as I had mentioned, bus rapid transit is what we're looking at for the east-west corridor today, and the mode that we feel will be most competitive for to qualify for federal funding and to be advancing through that mode. Now that as we develop that base of ridership through bus rapid transit, there may be an opportunity in the future to go to a different technology as we're getting there and just trying to move forward with that. The economic development potential is something that we will be getting as we're moving forward through that detailed evaluation, ridership for this corridor, and all of those various things as they come up. And I think as we're moving on, yeah.
Thanks, Gavin. Gavin, great information there and lots of great questions. And so, Josh Lapp, I'm going to call on you. You have a question in the chat box about how you, more about ridership and opportunity to expand. So, Josh, can you articulate your question? And meanwhile, Preeti, why don't you go back up to the ridership slide?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so this question is coming from a place of, you know, just wanting to understand this as, you know, our organization, Transit Columbus, is representing obviously transit riders and advocating for these kinds of things. And as we're advocating in the community, I want to be able to understand how these things are being evaluated. So when questions inevitably come up, that we know how to answer them, and that we feel like we're understanding everything very well. So my big question was, you know, I have obviously paid attention to transit things that are going on all over the country. And it seems like most of the analyses that are done on other projects are all about evaluating the future ridership. And it would just be good to know, in my opinion, if we're looking at this, to understand what the future ridership might be if we built out certain modes versus if we build others. So if we build BRT, you know, we're saying there could be a 20 to 40% increase. And what would that look like if we did LRT, which, you know, it's being screened out as part of this, but I just kind of want to understand what that looks like.
Yeah.
Or
and
if
Julia,
that's part of the evaluation.
Julia also stand by. Okay, Gavin.
So yeah, so you raised a very good question about looking at future ridership. And one of the things we will be doing as part of that detailed evaluation that's coming up that Julia had mentioned, we'll be presenting in, I believe, March, if we go back to this, if we go back to that schedule, but it's at the next meeting. We will be developing corridor specific run times, station locations, and ridership forecasts for that, because, and there'll be different options there, so that we know and can say the range, and we'll do that both for a current year forecast, so kind of a comparison to what it would be if that was in place today, I think, without COVID, and then what it would be in 2040, so a 20-year time frame essentially, and that's the way that FTA looks to evaluate these projects, and that's why you see that as that standard that you had mentioned. Looking around the country, you know, people are looking not only at today but at that future ridership. So that is something we are and will be doing for the various alternatives that we're moving forward with.
So Gavin, hold that thought. Julia, a related question is, are we eliminating light rail too soon? You know, we're getting some people saying, well, wait a minute, it seems too early and you haven't really predicted the future demand. Can you explain why you're ready to make that decision today when you don't have the total ridership projections yet?
Sure. And can you hear me okay? I've been struggling with audio. Okay. Perfect. So it's a great question. We know a lot of people are very excited about LRT. What we're seeing, hold on, I'm getting feedback on myself.
We are not hearing it. You sound good.
You're now on mute.
Okay, let me see. Sorry, you think I'd be more on top of this into the pandemic. But so the issue is that the FTA looks at very specific calculations that balance ridership demand with capital cost. So if we take a project to them that shows a ridership that's maybe in the 15,000 range, but costs potentially $1 billion or more just based on how much LRT costs to implement, we will not be successful in attracting federal funding. That is not to say that there cannot be LRT in this corridor in the future. What we're focusing on now is identifying the high capacity transit investment that meets the needs of the corridor today and is sized to meet demand into the near term, meeting the next 20 to 30 years. So by the time the demand in the corridor grows to a level that could be supportive of light rail, there could be whole new technologies that are being developed right now that are a better fit for the corridor. So what we want to do now is focus on preserving right-of-way so that we can use the technology of today to move people more quickly through the corridor while positioning us for those emerging technologies as they emerge and as the demand within the corridor increases. So really what we want to do is make sure that we're not investing in a technology that doesn't meet the needs of the corridor today and won't be successful in attracting federal funding.
I guess I understand what you're saying there, but if we never even get to see the evaluation, then that's kind of my issue with it, because we're basically saying, you know, we're not even going to consider that because it can't get federal funding. And I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that we should make the best decision. I just think, again, because this is a bunch of community leaders here, if we're the ones that are going to go sell this to the community, we need to understand ourselves what that actually looks like, so that I can look at it and say, you know, so anybody can look at it and say, I see this analysis, it makes sense, and you know, that's like, we can endorse this, what probably is the right decision. I mean, I think BRT probably is the right decision. I just want to be able to sell that to my constituents, and I think that is helpful for everybody if they can, if we understand it a little bit better.
Sure. Oh, Marie, are you?
I was just gonna say, Josh, I'm going to call on a couple other people, and I'm going to. There are a number of people that are saying, "Gosh, I hear what you're saying, but I think mentally a lot of people believe there's more of an appeal of light rail than bus rapid transit," and so a feeling, I think, from the people who are responding that, gosh, it just seems like you're making this light rail decision early, just to reiterate what Josh just said. So what is it that makes you believe that we're talking about, like, if we were to do everything MORPC predicted in the future, growth and density, I think I just heard you say that the most ridership we might expect based on that data today in the corridor might be from this, you know, almost 9,000 riders a day, potentially to double. Right, Julia? So is that part of what's driving the decision to leave it off the table now?
So I would say, and I think Zach wants to weigh in here, but we typically see a 20 to maybe 40% increase in ridership following a high capacity transit investment. So using that general rule of thumb, we're not getting anywhere close to even the lower bound of what justifies a light rail investment.
Okay, and then Julia, I see Kim and then Zach. So can we go to Kim first and then Zach, and then Lupe, I see you there too, so stand by.
Just briefly, thank you, Marie. There's a good question in the chat box, which we probably can't go into in depth today, and that's the federal funding requirements and directions. And I just want to say, it's actually not a black box. They're super clear about it. All the directions are online. We have very clear directions as a transit authority about what we can and can't do and how all of this is evaluated. So I think maybe at the next stakeholder group meeting, it would probably be good to spend quite a bit of time discussing the federal process and what the FTA evaluates and how they'll look at this project. So I just want to say I appreciate that comment, Mark, and I think it deserves a deeper dive.
Thank you. And then Lupe, did you want to say something? Guadalupe? Okay, I don't think so. I'm going to move on. Zach, did you want to add something too?
No, that's fine. We can move on.
Okay, so we've already paused for questions and comments, and I have time for one more comment. So I'm gonna let's call on Daryl and then Mark. All right. So Daryl, do you want to expand on your comment there?
Sure. Sure. And in all the experience I have with organizations and trying to, it's better to get consensus of what we're doing than just saying, this is the way it is, and no one has any type of input, if you follow what I'm saying. Somehow consensus needs to be built. Otherwise, people will not feel like it's their decision and participate in it.
So are what you're really saying is you're hearing a lot of support for light rail, and so you're uncomfortable with dropping it at this point? I'm
saying whatever we look at, there are a lot of people who are looking, are interested in light rail. So I think that needs to be built out enough so people understand the decision process. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Mark Conti. And then Megan Meyer, I'm going to go to you next after Mark.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Daryl that it seems like we need to put BRT and light rail up against each other and let this community group really see all of the data. And then the metrics you used already were great, but there were other things brought up at the beginning of the presentation, like ridership, or not just ridership, but equity, and this whole issue of spurring new economic development. There's a lot more metrics I think we all need to look at for both modes, and BRT may still come out ahead. That's fine, but I think what you're hearing is a lot of us still have those questions. And to go back to the scoring, to us as the community, federal scoring is a black box. We never get to see it. So to know what that scoring is going to look like, and then putting that up against our community needs that we've talked about. And I would say one more time, it's just premature to just knock light rail off the table. I've been part of alternatives analyses going back almost 25 years. And when it comes to light rail or even transit, a lot of times you bring it up at one meeting and the consultants say, oh, it's too early. Then you bring it up at the next meeting and say, oh, it's too late. And so here we are again in a meeting. It's the first meeting and we're saying we want to evaluate light rail, and you're now saying, oh, it's too late.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Mark. That's a great comment. And then Megan.
Thank you. Hi. Honestly, just echoing the concerns that everybody's just shared. I'm cheating a little bit because I'm also participating on another one of these groups. I'm filling in for Zach Woodruff today. So I'm sorry, I've seen the detailed reports, and my main concern, and I'm going to take my city planner hat off for a second and say, as a potential rider of CODA, someone who lives downtown, commutes east to Whitehall, I would really be concerned that perceptions of these aren't taken into account before they're written off. I just moved back from Chicago, where I did commute in both many modes, actually, by bus, by train, and by metro. And I think that perception is huge, and that like future planning for this is huge. And so I honestly think that, I'm not speaking for all people my age, but I think that CODA doesn't necessarily have a great perception, and we default to cars, and that to base it on current ridership because the system isn't really well liked or well used is a disservice to what it could be in the future. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. That was really good. You can be an alternative anytime. Very eloquent. All right. Rachel Lenning, I'm going to call on you and then we're going to move on. So Rachel, you get the last word on this.
Thank you. I think I had two questions. The first was just whether we are limited to federal funding, because it seems like that is a big point of, or that's a big reason that light rail is not being considered, because it's very expensive. We think we wouldn't reach the ridership that would justify it. Are we limited to that federal funding? I think maybe that's something that we would look at a later meeting of this group in more detail. But at the same time, I think the options that we have now with our buses are limited, and it drives people to not choose them and to choose other options. And so I think we're limiting ourselves by looking at current ridership. And I kind of is echoed by what Megan said. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is feedback the team is going to take back and digest. So this is really helpful. Now I'm going to move along, and Preeti, you're going to lead us through the alignment discussion, and which will go faster, by the way, I think. So move ahead.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Good morning, everyone. So yes, I'm going to talk about the alignment screening, which is that second element to this whole initial screening first phase of the analysis. So this is the corridor. Again, we have one option on the west side, that's West Broad, from Westwoods Boulevard to downtown Columbus. And then on the east side, we have East Broad Street from downtown to the Franklin-Licking County boundary, or East Main Street. So two options there. And then downtown Columbus, we have 4 alignments that we're considering. And these were chosen just to avoid a lot of jogging through the network downtown and to also draw from the biggest ridership pool that we can. So the first alignment is just going straight on through on Broad. The other 3 connect West Broad to East Main. So we do that via High Street. Then we have 3rd and 4th Street couplet using 3rd Street southbound, 4th northbound. And then we have Grant Avenue. So for this initial screening, each of these alignments that I just went over are evaluated based on 10 evaluation criteria that we extracted from the purpose and need that Julia went over earlier. So those criteria are existing ridership, connections to high capacity transit, which Gail mentioned earlier that are going to be built out as part of LinkUs, employment served, non-employment trip generators served. We're also going to look at population density, minority population served, population living in poverty served, 0 vehicle households, legally binding affordable housing, and finally, right-of-way availability. So the screening process here for all 10 of these criteria is similar to what we performed for the modal analysis. We're going to look at each alignment and give them a rating, or we did look at each alignment and gave them a rating of best, good, fair, or poor. And any alignment that received a poor rating was not carried forward into the next phase of analysis. So, spoiler alert, nearly all of the criteria did not result in an exclusion. So we actually, in fact, only had 1 poor rating. And so I'm going to focus on that criteria, which is right-of-way availability. So this table shows you the right-of-way width for each of the alignments that we just discussed. In the last column there, you see our overall assessment, and you can draw your attention to the red box there, which is a poor rating for Grant Avenue. So this is an aerial view of Grant Ave. It is only 66 feet wide, including 3 to 4 travel lanes and sidewalks. And so this is just, it would not allow high capacity transit to function optimally. So due to this constraint, we did give it that poor rating, which excludes it from feature analysis. But the other alignments remain. So I'm going to run through a summary of the alignment screening results, kind of by section. So the West Corridor, which stands alone here, we have a smattering of fair, good, and best ratings. In downtown, you'll see a few differentiators where one alignment fares a little bit better than another, but it's fairly balanced across criteria. And then as Gavin mentioned earlier, kind of the distinguishing, the good, best, and fair differentiators, they only factor into this phase of the analysis. In the future, when we get to more details, you know, these are not going to hold true, or these won't matter anymore. That will be looking at real numbers, and it'll be a fresh analysis at that point. But you can see on Grant Avenue here, we have a red box indicating that poor right-of-way availability rating. And then for the East Corridor, we have strengths and weaknesses kind of for both options, but also kind of relatively balanced. So all of these alignments that did not receive a poor rating warrant further really detailed study into the nitty gritty. So just to kind of reiterate the purpose of this initial screening, we're eliminating those fatal flaws early on so that we can focus that next round of study. And in the big picture here, Grant is the only one that does not warrant further study based on this exercise. And this is just a slide to summarize the 2 phases of the initial screening. It kind of wraps up our summary here. We are planning to study bus rapid transit and the alignment options that we just covered. And I'll introduce you guys to the detailed analysis, but I think we want to pause here for questions on the alignment.
So first, I missed Guadalupe last time. So Guadalupe, do you want to make a comment?
Sure. I know we've moved on to the next part of this presentation, but I guess my concern is as being part of meetings for probably, it seems like maybe even 15 years, where either I've called a meeting to speak with CODA regarding, accessibility, especially for, English proficient individuals, but even just individuals that don't have cars. It seems like as a city, we just keep holding ourselves back by not moving to the next phase. And I know money is an issue. I mean, clearly we're talking about receiving federal funds, but I also feel like we're still only looking at how we can grow a little bit and not really big picture, even though we're saying 20 years, because I feel like it's almost been 20 years and we've been asking for years for more busing. So now we're at a point where, okay, more frequent busing, and, more accessibility. But now when there's a time to apply for money, it's going to be to answer that problem. And then we're going to bump into, the next problem, which we may not have another opportunity to ask for funding. So I don't know if there's, in addition to the application, a way to make a case study, because all the cities you showed, right, they're thriving, right, and people are commuting, and it's all about economic development and access to jobs. And I just feel strongly about, how can we fill this need and grow to truly be that the international city we want to. We know that corporations have not come here because of transportation. And while we have been, I feel like, organically growing as a city for, 30, 40 years, the fastest growing city, transportation is still the issue. And what Megan said and the other gentleman, it is very much limiting us to grow on so many levels. So I understand your position, Julie, and what you have to do to get funding. But, how do we think out of the box in this? Because I feel like we're just only meeting needs instead of planning for the future.
Thank you so much, Guadalupe. That's a really good comment. And I want to reassure you, we are listening to what you're telling us. And so we will digest that, and we'll kind of determine our next steps, because there's also an issue of managing expectations too, right? And we are about to go out to public meetings, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, it's a careful line to walk. All right, one more comment in the chat box. Let's see. There's some questions about the length and some more detail on bike planning and so forth. A lot of that additional mobility and so forth is going to be discussed in more detail at future meetings. So I want you to know it's all on the table. Affordable housing, a lot of those topics. We are tight on time though. So if we could move on to evaluation methodology just real quickly.
Sure. So I'm just gonna, we've been referencing this upcoming detailed evaluation quite a bit. And I'm just going to introduce kind of what that's going to look like to all of you, and let you know what the categories are that we're going to dive into.
Hold that thought just a second, because I think Terry wanted to make a comment on the alignment issue. Terry Fogler?
No, I did not. Sorry if that came through.
Okay. Aaron, I want to call on Aaron Sink real quickly. I think that's who may also have their hand up.
You mentioned it a little bit about the bike alignment coming later, but I want to make sure that we're not so heavily focused on one mode that we're overlooking that active transportation piece, because that's also primary, I think, for folks that don't have access to a car. So when we're thinking about equity, it's not just the bus. I know that there's a lot more dollars tied up in that, but I think it's really important that we're thinking about that in the right-of-way consideration as well. Because there is only so much right away, and we need to make sure that as we're selecting modes and things like that, that we're ensuring there's enough space for everything that we need to accomplish on those streets.
Thanks, Aaron. And I think you inadvertently, or maybe did this on purpose. That's also that first last mile connection as well. Making sure there's sidewalks and shared use paths and bike lanes and so forth. So appreciate that. All right, I'm sorry, Preeti, I interrupted you. Roll on ahead.
All good. So the first thing I'm showing you here is the corridor divided up into 10 segments. So our detailed evaluation is going to be reported to you all in these segments. And the reason for this is it allows us to compare different solutions at different locations. So while maybe our analysis will focus on bus rapid transit, there are options within that we want to analyze. For example, interactions with bike lanes, whether we have a dedicated lane, options for whether the bus travels on one side of the street or another. So these solutions, we can kind of compartmentalize them a little bit for the analysis and give all of you all the data to make the best, to choose the optimal solutions that can be woven together for the entire corridor. We do want to just mention, I know there's a ton of people on here, but representatives from all the different segments. And if there are particular opportunities or challenges that you want to, that you think are worth noting, or you want to just inform us about, you can please email them to Zach. We want to take full advantage of the opportunities to incorporate neighborhood characteristics as we get into the detailed definition of the alternatives moving forward. So as I said, the analysis will be reported in these segments, and we have 6 areas of study that will be developed. One of those areas is transportation. So we'll be looking at traffic impacts and transportation impacts broadly, not just traffic, at select intersections along the corridor. We've chosen these study area intersections based on frequency of crashes, volumes, and basically their potential for consequential impacts with high capacity transit implementation. So we'll be looking at ped and bike access throughout the corridor, but safety impacts, parking impacts, and traffic impacts will be studied specifically at our highlighted intersections. And then, sorry. So that covers kind of an introduction to the transportation analysis methodology. We are also going to dive into 5 other study areas. Sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. It is environmental. So we're going to look at environmental resources and benefits with each alternative. We're going to look at land use opportunities and economic benefit potential. We will prepare preliminary capital cost estimates. We'll look at annual operating and maintenance costs. And lastly, we'll have ridership forecasts for each of the alternatives. So the next meeting, we're really going to dive into these areas in great detail for all of you to, again, give you the data that you need to empower decision-making in the future.
Thanks, Preeti. And Josh, not Josh, but Zach, could you respond to the question of what if the alignment in your neighborhood is not chosen? What could happen in the other alignment, or what other improvements might be considered as part of this overall project?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. That's a good question. We have service there today, and particularly on the east side, both of it is frequent service with line 2 and line 10. The alignment that's not chosen to be considered to be linked with West Broad, we'll still look to adding improvements to that, whether that's limited stops or other amenities or techniques to kind of speed up the travel and make transit on that specific corridor more usable. And in addition, as a transit agency, we're constantly looking to improve our service and network. So this east-west corridor is a lot of transit riders use it to transfer to other routes. So definitely kind of in relation to this, but also outside of this, in terms of a CODA service planning activity, is we'll be looking at all of those connections and making sure that transfers are safe, easy, all of that. So I think that answers the question, Marie.
Great, thanks, Zach. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Chris Jones here. And Chris, in about 3 minutes, I'd like you to recap what's coming up with public engagement. So Preeti, next slide.
Easy. Next slide, please. How's everyone doing? So, I mean, we've heard a lot of good feedback today, obviously, and on our BRT versus LRT and the things that we'll be doing together. So we're kind of in that learn and engage phase right now. So that will be us, you know, doing these community meetings, surveying you, asking you questions individually and as groups, and in our group meetings. So we'll be collaborating with you during this time and leading up to our survey, leading up to some of our engagements. And then we'll be able to create together. Once we've all come to some consensus on our pathway together, we can work together to reimagine, like, what does that actually look like and how does that apply to your individual neighborhoods? And then we can kind of do some things together later on this summer or whatnot, just to make sure that we're all, you know, together on that moving forward. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here's some specific engagement. So we have a monthly e-newsletter with Link Us coming out. So that's just to keep us all in the loop, some of our supporters and things of that nature, and advocates and ambassadors as we go along. In February, some virtual community meetings start on February 16th, as well as our survey will come out through Link Us website and you know, be there to get your feedback and those of your community members. May and June, more of the survey and our meeting results, and then a second round of community meetings for all of you to participate. And lastly, is the invite for our virtual engagement. So just save the date. Around February 16th, you'll get more information out on our survey, on our community meetings. And we really appreciate and will appreciate all of the feedback that we'll get here very soon.
Thanks, Chris. And just to add on that, before I have Zach address this slide, we will, the Warhol and Wall Street team is leading the public engagement. And so they're developing all those notification materials, social media stuff, and you know, all those publicity materials. When those are packaged and ready to go, I will probably be the one who will send that information to you so that you can plug it into your own communication channels. And we'd really appreciate any help you can provide on that. You reach thousands more people than just our little list. So anything you can do to help is great. Okay, Zach, what's the next public meeting for Northwest?
Yes, so you know, today we talked about the East-West Corridor, but we also working with the Northwest Corridor with partners with the City of Columbus and Morpsey, Franklin County. There's a typo on this slide that Justin mentioned in the chat. There will be a virtual open house beginning on February 1st. I think that's next Monday. So keep your eyes out for that. Obviously, it's at the link at the bottom there. If you go to the next slide, it has more information about the website. And then, Chris, I didn't know if there's anything else to mention, but if you have any suggestions about public engagement, it is included. There's an email link included in that previous slide.
Yeah, please email us and utilize the Link Us page to reach out. But that East-West Link Us at warholandwallstreet.com is more of a direct route to us and East-West team.
Awesome. And so, and you have my email if for some reason, and Zach's email is in the email I originally sent to you. So you have contact information for us and we can get you to the right person to give you help. All right, so let me recap the next steps real quickly because my commitment to you is we get done on time. So you gave us a lot of phenomenal feedback today, a lot of good questions, which we're going to debrief and really dive into. We're going to look at your chat comments as well. We are, there's already been a draft of the evaluation screening results at this high level to the technical group. Our plan was to digest their feedback, which is due in a week or so, and then to circulate it to all of you as well. You know, based on what you told us today, we may regroup a little bit, so we'll stand by. And but then that really detailed and frankly more expensive work begins to build out those evaluation of all those different alternatives. And then I will send you a meeting invitation through Outlook to the next stakeholder group. I'll try to get that to you as soon as possible so you can reserve the date. And then when we get closer to the meeting, we'll send you the meeting materials in advance. So let's just go to that next slide. And we want to say, again, I'm going to ask Zach to say a few words in conclusion. So why don't I let you do that, Zach?
Sure. Thanks, Marie. And, thanks everybody for participating today, and we value your time greatly. This 90 minutes, I know there's a lot of information packed into these slides. And obviously I think you'll probably want to digest some of it. Feel free to send me any questions via email or phone number. And I will, expect to hear from you all soon. Again, our next meeting will be April 21st. We'll be getting the invites out shortly to that, I believe. I don't think they've been sent out yet, but again, thanks again for your time, and we will talk to you soon.
And one last logistical item, there were a couple things, a little typo here and there on the PowerPoint. We're going to fix those, and I'm going to send you a new version of the PDF. So just delete this one and I'll send you the other one. There's not going to be a lot of differences, but just so we want to make sure you have a clean, accurate file. So thank you so much, and have a great day, and enjoy your lunch because it's lunchtime. We are adjourned. Bye, everybody.